We're going to start out with a video. It doesn't quite load on the slide, but we have it here. This video is going to go over a plane crash, believe it or not. It's going to teach you about a concept called closed loop communication. So watch this video. I'm also just a big fan of aviation, but we're going to watch this video. We're going to learn about a plane crash that happened and how it could be prevented. And then we're going to see that there's actually quite a bit of overlap of what we do.
Eastern 401 heavy. Continue approach to 9 left.
Continue approach, roger.
Actual airline pilots play the parts of the ill-fated crew. The dialogue is taken from the cockpit voice recorder and altered only to remove or change expletives and names. Certain omissions have been made to shorten the elapsed time.
Now I'm going to try it down one more time.
Eastern Flight 401 is on final approach to Miami International, runway 9 left. The nose landing gear indicator has failed to illuminate, so the crew cannot tell whether the gear is extended and locked.
You want me to test the lights or not?
Yeah, check it.
Watch your seat back.
Doug, it could be light. Could you jiggle the light?
It's got to come out a little and then snap in.
I'll put them on. Up to 2,000. You want me to fly, Doug? What frequency did he want us on? 28.6. I'll talk to him. All right, approach control Eastern 401. We're right over the airport here and climbing to 2,000 feet. In fact, we've just reached 2,000 feet, and we've got to get a green light on our nose gear.
Eastern 401, roger. Turn left heading 360. Maintain 2,000. Vectors to 9 left final.
Left to 360.
I think it's above the red one.
Yeah, I can't get it from here.
I can't make it pull out either.
We got pressure?
Yes, sir. All systems.
Put the damn thing on autopilot. All right. See if you can put that light out. Well, you got to push the switch just a little bit further forward. Now turn it to the right a little bit. No, I don't think it's going to fit. Hey, get down there and see if that damn nose wheel's down. Okay. You got a handkerchief or something so I can get a little better grip on this? Anything I can do with? This damn thing just won't come out, Doug. If I had a pair of pliers, I could cushion it with that cleaner.
The captain has neglected to divide up flying responsibilities. Everyone is absorbed by the crisis, so they don't hear the audio alert announcing a change in altitude.
Do the pliers.
To hell with this. Go down and see if that red line is lined up down there. Don't screw around with that 20-cent piece of light equipment. Eastern 401, I'll go out west just a little further if we can here and see if we can get this light to come on.
All right.
The autopilot has somehow become disengaged. The plane is slowly descending, and nobody is paying any attention to the altimeter.
It's always something. We could have made schedule. Well, we can tell if the damn gear is down by looking down at the indices. I'm sure.
An emergency landing with a possible nose gear problem is neither very risky nor all that unusual. It's an option the captain could be preparing for now.
It's got to be a faulty light. Doug, this damn thing just won't come out. All right, just leave it there.
Eastern 401, how are things coming along out there?
The controller's inquiry is too vague for the crew to realize he's asking about 401's surprisingly low altitude.
Okay. 180. Hey, we did some to the altitude here. What? We're still at 2,000, right? Hey, what's happening here?
So 101 people died because 3 people got distracted, right? I want you to think about the things that we've done. Imagine yourself on an EMS call. Now I want you to think, could you get distracted, right? And the answer is absolutely, right? You're going to get distracted. Um, I've certainly gotten distracted. I continue to get distracted. And we're a team, right? Um, you're not alone. You work with others, and we can all get distracted, right? We're all people. We're all human. And so there's actually a number of things that we should take away from this video. The first is that was maybe not a routine thing, but not really the end of the world, right? Like literally a light bulb burnt out. There were no other problems. It was just this indicator. And so, um, imagine you have a patient, you put a pulse ox on, and it gets a low reading. Right now, you spend all this time and effort trying to diagnose this thing, and maybe they just had nail polish on, right? But now you spend all of this effort focused in one direction, and reality in the other direction is really where you should be focused, and now you're missing some things, right? And there's dozens of things like that in EMS, right? I'm not going to enumerate them, but it's really important to kind of take away that there are a bunch of things that will distract you in EMS, right? There's things that will distract you. There's things that will distract your patient, your partner, your team. And so we have to go into this knowing there will be things that distract us. There are things that are more important, right? And we need to make sure that we don't miss it. So that's one of the reasons we hammer so hard your systematic approach, right? Like if I am making sure that I follow, a thorough assessment methodology every single time, I make sure that I hit all of my wickets, I check all of my things, even when 95% of the time, like they're gonna be okay. Well, it's that 5% that I'm not really practiced for, that I have gotten complacent, that I've, kind of allowed myself to, um, get complacent that, oh, okay, I'm not going to get burned by those. Um, the other thing you see is closed loop communication, which is really important, especially for us. And it does a few things. Closed loop communication helps with kind of that distraction, but it also helps, okay, if I've delegated something or I've assigned something, has it gotten done? Is it going to get done? When did it get done, right? And so a way that would look like, or what that would look like for us is, hey, can you check a pulse ox and let me know what it is? And then you would say, I'll get you a pulse ox. You would go, you'd do the pulse ox, and then you'd say, I've gotten the pulse ox for you. So when you delegate something to somebody, you ask somebody to do something, you ask for a piece of information, they should read back to you what it is that you're asking them, right? If I say, hey, can you check the oxygen? Um, and they go come back with blood sugar, you know, that was likely a waste of time, right? Not that you wouldn't want a blood sugar, but that's not what we're looking for right now. So if I say, hey, can you check the oxygen for me? Can you check a pulse ox? I'll check a blood sugar for you. No, no, no. I need you to check the pulse oximetry. Or if I say check the oxygen, that could be a number of things. Could you check the pulse ox? Could you check, their signs of high cyanosis? Could you check that the cylinder on the ambulance is on, the portable? Could you plug it in? Right? Because in my mind, I may think, hey, check the oxygen because I'm thinking the tank needs to be turned on, and you might not be thinking that. And so that's where that closed loop communication comes in. So as you work as a EMS provider, as we do these simulations, we're going to be looking for, hey, can you do this? The other person, I'm going to do this. I will check for this, and then it happens, right? Come back with it. The other thing is if you were asked to do something and you're not comfortable, you don't know how, you're not totally certain, or you think it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, hey, just to clarify, you'd like this, or should we do this instead? What are your thoughts? Not that you're being difficult or challenging them per se, but you can, question, oh, is this what you meant? Did you mean this? because it's easy to get distracted, especially as an ALS provider, right? If I'm trying to focus on my things, think about my things, and I think that you're managing the airway for me, if it starts to get difficult to bag the patient or they start to bleed or they vomit, if you don't tell me, I'm probably not clued into that, right? So I'm looking for you to be, my eyes and ears, tell me what I need. And so your other teammates are likely expecting the same thing. And so it's a shame that 101 people had to die all because of a light bulb burnt out and a couple of people got distracted, right? And what you really don't want is to be on the news because that distraction led to your patient dying, right? We work in some fast-paced, high-stress, high commotion environments, and so we need to make sure that we have a tool set um, to make sure that every time we do a patient contact and we provide patient care, that we're giving them the care they need, that it's timely, that it's well executed, well communicated, right? And so you can't even know this is a problem until it's pointed out, but that's this, right? So this is pointing it out. The closed loop communication is one of the biggest tools, right? Also approaching your patient care, um, without much ego, right? Understand that you can learn something from everybody, right? Even if you've been doing this for 10 years, someone may have taken a class, learned a skill, they may have had a patient encounter that you have not had. Um, I will also say that when you're working in front of the patient, if the people caring for them are bickering or cold-shouldered or not very engaged, the patient's going to pick up on that, right? They can tell if you're implementing closed-loop communication, you're working well together, you're open to other people noticing things, it's going to go a long way, right? Um, the other thing is if you behave in such a way that you're short, you're egotistical, you're unwilling to um, learn or recognize that maybe you made a mistake, it could be that you do make a mistake that could be pretty easily caught, pretty easily remedied. But if people don't feel that they could come to you and point that out, that might cause a bigger problem, right? Because if you go up, you're like, I see that the medic made a mistake, but that's really not my place. Maybe they grabbed a wrong drug, and you know that they grabbed a wrong drug, but you don't want to pull it up because they bite your head off every time, right? You don't want to be the person that people are afraid to bring something to you, because ultimately we're all going to make mistakes. We're all human. But it's if we don't reassess, if we're not working well as a team, people aren't pointing this out, that's where the bad outcomes come, right? Like it's okay to make a mistake. It's not okay to miss the mistake. Let me give you an example. Let's say that I accidentally give the patient too much fentanyl, right? Let's say I accidentally overdose them. Obviously, I don't want to, right? Like that's not a thing that we want to do. Um, but as part of my routine patient care, anytime I have a patient who has some respiratory distress, has, pretty significant altered mental status, um, or a patient that I'm giving a drug that can affect their respiratory drive, I always put them on nasal end tidal. Like I always put the nasal end tidal cannula on. I plug it into the monitor. It gives me an accurate respiratory rate. It gives me a waveform of how well they're evacuating air out of their lungs. And it gives me their end tidal. And if that patient were to ever stop breathing, that monitor is going to make a ruckus, right? And I don't even have to give oxygen through the cannula. I'm measuring their end tidal. I certainly can. And if I have it on, it's a lot easier to just turn it on. But as a kind of routine part of my patient care, if I'm going to give you a drug that affects your respiratory rate, or if you already have a problem with it, I'm putting you on this end tidal. And so let's say I accidentally give more fentanyl than I should have, right? So I accidentally overdose you. Okay, well, what would happen? They'd start to become more altered. They'd probably become unresponsive, right? With the overdose. I'd see pinpoint pupils, and their breathing would either slow down or stop, right? They'd either become bradypneic or they'd become apneic, right? Their pulse ox would start to drop, and their respiratory rate would drop. Now, because I put them on end tidal, the machine's going to beep. And so if that happens and I catch it, well, the moment they stop breathing, there's still some oxygen in their system. So if I'm able to replace this oxygen that's getting used, I've now bought myself time. So because I have them on that end tidal, the machine alerts me. Because I have them on the nasal end tidal, I can give them oxygen. And if their shallow is tube breathing or not enough, I put in an OPA or an MPA and I bag them, right? And I make sure that they get the oxygen. Now, at that point, I could just continue that until the opioids wear off. That wouldn't be wholly appropriate. Um, but instead, but I have a reversal agent called Narcan, and that Narcan binds to the neuroreceptor. It evicts the opioids. It returns their mentation. It returns their respiratory drive. And yeah, okay, I made a mistake. I overdosed them on fentanyl, but I immediately caught it. I immediately applied the remedies, and there would be no deficits, right? There'd be some paperwork, certainly, and I'd have to own it, and you can't hide these things. But no harm, no foul, right? Like, yeah, you made a mistake, but because you're always reassessing your patient, you're making sure that there's safeguards every step that you can. You caught it, you fixed it, right? And we can move on, as opposed to, let's say, I'm really difficult to work with and I'm always right and nobody can tell me anything. I accidentally give you too much fentanyl. I'm working on my own thing. Maybe the EMT notices, hey, they're kind of a little more altered than usual. Oh, that's fine. I gave them fentanyl. They should, take a nap. Um, and we miss an overdose and then they go to cardiac arrest. I like two very different outcomes, but it's the same mistake, right? But you could argue that the latter case is made some previous mistakes with failure to use closed loop communication, failure to be a solid team member. And this is really the point that I'm trying to make, that the way you communicate, the way you interface with your team, the way you carry yourself, plays into all of this. And it really does have life or death consequences with respect to our patient outcomes for all of the reasons that we went over, right? So when talking to patients, when talking to even our colleagues, it's really important that we're doing this effectively, and that we're doing it with an open mind, right? And so you're going to hear the term therapeutic communication. Typically, it implies communication between you and the patient. Um, but good empathetic communication with your peers is also therapeutic to the patient because you were a team, right? Like if you were degrading the team dynamic, the patient is the one who suffers. So therapeutic communication is a way of filtering or a way of thinking about your communication, a way of implementing your communication in the best interests of the patient, right? We as EMS providers are patient advocates. And what that means is everything that we do is for the patient, right? It is more important that we put the patient over ourselves, and we call that, right, putting, guys, I already, I'm blanking on it. Dang it. Anyways, therapeutic communication, right? Making sure that we're being a good steward for the patient. So things that we should be doing is active listening, right? You want to make sure that when the patient is talking, you're listening to listen, not just to ask another question. I'm frequently guilty of violating this myself. I have tried, like, I'll ask somebody their name and then I just immediately forget it. So if you ever see me on a call, I have my notepad and I'm writing everything down. That's because there's just a bunch of squirrels running around and I'm distracted by every single one of them. Um, Not that I want to, but I recognize that is just a deficit in me, right? So I know that I need to make sure that I'm listening to the patient, that when they tell me something, um, that I'm receiving it, right? And so the way that I have found that I'm able to make sure that happens is I have my notepad, I write everything down, right? Um, I have the notepad, I've got the pen, I'm writing it down, and people are pretty comfortable with that, right? Like If you have an iPad, which a lot of agencies do, if you're typing into the iPad, I personally feel like that can be impersonal. Um, so when I pull out the iPad typically later in the call, right, that's after I've done my active listening, I've built my rapport, I've managed what I need to with the patient, and then I'm throwing some documentation in, I'm getting a signature and such. So that's just my personal style. I'm not a huge fan of, I don't bring the iPad in the house. I don't love using the iPad in front of the patient because personally I feel like it's impersonal. Whereas the pen, the piece of paper, people are pretty comfortable with what's going on there, right? So active listening. We want to make sure that when the patient talks, when we ask questions, we're there to actually understand and listen. You can reflect or reiterate what the patient has said afterwards. This is kind of our closed loop communication in play, right? So if the patient says their name or date of birth or answers a question, you can rephrase it, you can repeat it back word for word. You can say, did I understand that correctly? Especially for the high importance things, right? Are you on blood thinners? If they say no. So it's like, are you on blood thinners? They say no. So, okay, no blood thinners. And then, you can ask your next question. So by repeating it back, okay, I've heard it. Here's what I heard. It gives them a chance to correct it. Maybe you misheard it. It lets them know, okay, you're actually taking the answers that I give you. Um, Silence. And really what that means is when you ask a question, let them answer it, right? If you ask a question and you just talk right over him, you ask him another question, then you're like, well, did you want the answer or not? You're not giving me time to adequately answer or give you the information that you sought. So you ask them a question, let them answer it. Once it seems like they're done answering it, okay, now you can do a follow-up question. I'll typically ask a follow-up question that utilizes information they just gave me, lets you dig a little deeper, helps kind of reflect on it. And it also shows, okay, you were listening because to ask me the question you just asked, you had to have been able to listen and understand what I answered earlier. Summarizing is similar to the reflecting, except it's kind of a little broader in that they've told you a few things. And then what I'll do is say, okay, let me just summarize what I've heard so far to make sure we're on the same page. So about 3 days ago, you started feeling this way. This morning you woke up, you went to the bathroom, and then you felt dizzy. You threw up once. Um, you went up to your bed and then you called us. Do I have that right? Right. Whereas reflecting would just be kind of one chunk of it. Summarizing is, all right, here's what I have so far. You can go through, okay, here's what I have for your medical history. It gives you kind of the same opportunities that reflecting does is here's what I heard. Is that right? Here's where I'm at. Is that right? So it tells them, okay, they've got the story. They listened. Gives them an opportunity to kind of make any corrections to the record should they find necessary, right? Another thing I'll do is I will explain or provide rationale what I'm doing, why I'm doing, especially for treatments. If somebody's getting a refusal, I'll explain to them, okay, well, why it's hazardous, why it's dangerous, the pros and the cons of each. Uh, because ultimately, they're typically adults. They're alert, they're oriented. This is their patient care. If a person doesn't want something, they don't have to have it done. But it is important that we communicate to them um, any risks associated, any benefits associated. If I have a person and I need to give medication or I'd like to do an IV or whatever it is, all right, well, I'd like to get an IV in you. It will let us do some fluids. You will feel a slight discomfort while we do it. Um, Typically, they're okay with it. Some folks are like, oh, I don't really want an IV. Say, okay, well, let's talk about it, right? I like to do the IV to give you fluids because you've been nauseous, you've been vomiting, so it can give me some fluids to make you feel a little bit better. I can also give you medication that will help the nausea. Both of these, I'd like the IV for. And they're like, oh, I really don't want the IV. It's like, okay, well, the drug works pretty well if I give it IV. I could give you an oral tablet for the antiemetic, which is the anti-nausea pill, if you'd like. Okay, I'll do that. And then I'll say, okay, just so if we have the IV in place and something goes sideways, that IV allows us to quickly give you medications. I just want you to know that you can still absolutely refuse the IV. Just know that if something goes sideways, we might need to either start the IV or if we can't get it, do a more invasive measure. Are you okay with that? I'm like, okay. And as long as they understand, here's what I want to do, here's why I'd like to do it. Um, Here's the position we're going to be in if we don't do it. If they're okay with that, it's their patient care, right? The other thing that providing rationale does is it lets them know, okay, this person actually knows what the heck they're doing, right? Um, and you need to know what you're doing if you're going to be able to explain it to them, right? Like we don't just do things to do things. We assess things for a purpose. We do treatments for a purpose, and we need to make sure that we know what and why we're doing it. We also have to communicate it to the patient because that's who it's getting done to, right? Some things not to do is negative body language, right? Like if your arms are crossed, you appear distant. If you're standing directly over the patient, staring down, if you're making kind of facial remarks in such a way where the patient feels that you're either annoyed or disengaged, that's not going to make them feel very comfortable with you. It's not going to make them want to open up and share. Unsolicited advice, the patient's not there for what you think of them or their situation or what they should be doing. If they ask you, what do you think of this? Yeah, you can give them your opinion or kind of your perspective on it. But we're not here to just give advice if they don't want it, right? Um, Also, false reassurance. Like if you don't know that they're going to be okay, don't tell them, right? Now, I'm not saying you go up to them and be like, oh, it's not okay, or I can't tell you. It's just, hey, when we get to the hospital, they're going to be able to do imaging and labs that we can't do, right? Um, our goal here is to make you as comfortable as possible, treat the things that we can treat, and then you get, the folks who can take care of what needs to be taken care of, right? And that's how you approach that. Um, Also agreeing or disagreeing, similar to that unsolicited advice. This isn't us, right? This is their care. If they don't want the IV, we've explained to them why we want to do it. We don't do it. If we think they need epinephrine, they don't want it. If they're alert oriented, we're not going to force it on, right? Like, we're not kidnapping these people. We're not forcing them to do or take things they don't want to do. And this broadly is what we consider therapeutic communication, right? We're patient advocates. I knew it would come back to me, patient advocate. What a patient advocate means is we're there for them. If they don't want something, we need to make sure that they understand, what it is, why they do or do not want it. When we get to the hospital, we need to advocate for the patient. If they want to put them in the hall and they're not appropriate for the hall, right, we have to stand up for that. If they need an intervention, maybe you have to call for ALS or do this or do that. We're there for the patient, right? As long as you're standing up for the patient and you're doing the right thing, you can have a pretty long, happy career. There's going to be points where leadership or the hospital or your teammates don't want to do something, but if it's the right thing for the patient, there's one clear answer, right? And so sometimes you're going to have sticking points throughout this career where if you are actually standing up for the patient, you may have folks who don't want to carry the patient. But if that's the most appropriate means, they're dizzy, they have a cardiac um, episode, and they really shouldn't be walking because they're a fall risk, yeah, you're going to have to carry them out. Like it is what it is. It's part of the job. And so you're going to come across those and just remember you're there for the patient. You need to be a patient advocate. Modes of communication. So we frequently use radios in fire and EMS, right? So we're typically frequently using land mobile radios. You are now starting to see some apps. So one of the ones that we use in the capital area is called I Am Responding. It's an app you download on your phone. Your agency gives you a login. You can see the other people on shift. You can usually see mutual aid. You can see all of the calls. You can see some call details. You can even hit that you're responding to calls. Really pretty nifty. Not all agencies have it. Some agencies use Active 911. Many use nothing. So we're not really going to get into the dispatch communication apps because that's really agency by agency. But pretty much every agency is going to have some means of two-way communication. And typically that's a land mobile radio. The radios that you hold in your hand and carry around with you, those are called portable radios. Those are usually 5 or 6 watts. Um, the radios that you have in the unit are called mobile radios, and the radios that you have like in a fixed location at the station are typically called base radios. They're usually just mobile radios put into like a case with a power supply, but we would call those, base radios. Typically, there's a dispatch center somewhere. So there's a telecommunicator, there's a dispatcher. They've got a bunch of radios, some computer terminals, and they're the ones sending out the calls. We talked about it in on our first day about how New Hampshire works. There's two PSAPs, or public safety answering points, which is where all the calls from 911 filter in. And then from there, they start asking their questions. They do their emergency medical dispatch, and then they disseminate that out to the dispatch centers throughout the state. And so typically the way it works is in New Hampshire, you'll get a pre-alert for medical calls. So it's just your agency's tones. And it's basically tones or frequencies that cause your pager or your radio to make an alert. It'll also trigger your I am responding app if you have it, and that lets you know, okay, I got a call. And then usually like 30 seconds, 45 seconds, or 60 seconds later, you'll get the actual dispatch call. So you'll get your tones again, which is just a few frequencies, and each agency has their own set of frequencies that open the squelch on their radios if you're in selective call mode. And then from there, the dispatch is going to tell you, Chichester Fire Rescue, Ambulance 1, go to 123 Main Street for a fall, right? So they're telling you the agency, they're telling you which truck is going, um, they're telling you where you're going and uh, what you're going for, right? And so depending on the system, there may be repeaters. So they may have these tall towers. They may put antennas on them. And what can happen is your portable and mobile radio transmits, and all of these VHF, UHF are line of sight, which means basically the radio waves travel in kind of a straight path. And you need kind of a direct line of sight between the radio and the tower. And so for these large service areas, you'll actually see a bunch of different towers and repeaters, and then they're backlinked either like over microwave or fiber optic. And so they can all be kind of interconnected. And so the repeaters, what they'll do is they'll receive the signal and then they will rebroadcast it out either on a separate frequency or the same frequency, depending whether it's simplex or duplex. You can kind of see that nuance in your reading. I won't bog you down with it now. But it will rebroadcast, it will repeat the signal, so then everyone in that catchment area can hear what you're saying, right? Some systems use repeaters, some don't, some repeat, some don't. It just kind of depends. But your mobile or portable radio need that line of sight with a repeater, and then that repeater is going to rebroadcast it. And this really just depends on the geography and the topology of the area as what and how they have it. And so that's kind of how we are doing our communication. Now, really the biggest thing with this is knowing that mobile and base radios have more oomph than the portables. So if you're ever trying to hail dispatch, communicate, and it's not coming through on your portable, which is the one that you carry with you in like say a radio strap or on your belt, switching over to a mobile is going to likely get you a lot further. They're higher up on the vehicle. They go from 5 watts to 50 to sometimes 75 watts. Really kind of depends on the radio and the setup you have. But usually they can clear some obstacles, hit the repeater when maybe your portable can. When using a radio, you want to make sure that nobody else is talking, right? Because you don't want to step on other people's transmissions. You want to push and hold the transmit or the push to talk button. You want to give it a second or two. Like if you start talking, then hit the button, the whole first part of your transmission is cut off. So when you hold that button, it usually takes a second or two for whatever you're speaking to start being broadcast. So push and hold the push to talk on the mic, hold it about 2 to 3 inches from your mouth, give it a second or two, and then go with your message. When we're using the radios, there's typically a few steps. So the PSAP is when the person calls 911, it gets routed to the PSAP. So the public safety answering point is talking to the 911 caller, getting details, asking questions, so on and so forth. That information that gets passed on to the dispatcher actually dispatches the call out. Chichester Fire, ambulance 1, respond to 123 Main Street for a fall, right? So then we're going to go out to the truck. We're going to push and hold the mic button for a couple seconds. We're going to hold it 2 to 3 inches from our mouth. And we're going to say, hey, you, it's me. Right? So if we're calling, if this is Chichester, Concord Fire Alarm, Chichester A1. Right? So I said the person I'm calling first, because if they're sitting there distracted, they're doing their thing, and they hear their name, they're going to start to clue in. So you call the person, you say the person you're trying to call first, and then you say who you are. Right? So Concord Fire Alarm, Chichester A1. They're going to come back, go ahead A1, right? They're going to answer your call. So then you're going to repeat the first chunk again. Concord Fire Alarm, Chichester A1, we're responding, right? We're en route to the call, right? So at each stage, we're letting dispatch know, we're communicating where we are, what we're doing. If something happens, we get attacked, we lose radio contact, whatever it may be, they're able to keep up, right? Because they know where they sent us, they know where we're coming from, that sort of deal. So you call that your en route. Then you can do the whole thing again once you get on scene. Concord Fire Alarm, Chichester A1. They're going to say, go ahead. You're going to say, Concord Fire Alarm, Chichester A1. We're on scene. Okay, now they know that you're here. Depending on the place you work, they may do patient contact, they may not. So there's, a handful of places you can call again when you've made contact. Because usually we can put that in your times, and that's actually a thing that you document as part of your patient care report. So typically you're on scene, you're doing your thing. You get them loaded in the truck. Concord Fire Alarm, Chichester A1. Go ahead. Concord Fire Alarm, Chichester A1. We're transporting one to Concord Hospital. Right? So I've told them I tell them which hospital I'm going to. I tell them that I'm loaded with a patient and that we're going. Right? You do the same thing once you get off at the hospital. And then once you transfer the patient over, you clean your truck, you're going to call back in service. Right? So each step of the call, we're letting dispatch and anyone who's listening, we're letting them know, okay, here's where we are on the call. If you don't transport to the hospital, it may be we're clear available with a refusal or a good intent call if there's no actual patient. So some of the nuance can change depending on, the type of call, what you're going to, and just kind of what your agency does. But more or less, this is kind of the anatomy of the steps of an EMS call and then the radio calls that we make. Some agencies may have an MDT or a mobile data terminal. That's a computer, an iPad in the truck. You hit a button when you're on scene, you're responding, you're on arrival, you're clear. A lot of this really just depends on the agency, you're with. But there are test items in the EMS operation sections on the different steps, the different modes of communication. So just kind of know what a MDT is, know, simplex, duplex, know what a repeater is. Make sure as you do that reading in your book that you're actually going through it because there's typically a number of questions on it. Radio report. So this is separate from dispatch. When we have a patient and we're going to the hospital, when we're about 5 or 10 minutes out, we're going to call that hospital and we're going to give them a radio report. It's basically saying, hey, we're about 5 or 10 minutes out. Here's what I've got. Here's the resources you're going to need. You're not doing a full patient history. You're not doing this is just kind of a quick, dirty, hey guys, we're 5 out. I got a mess for you, right? Or, hey, we're 5 out. The patient's stable. They're complaining of some nausea. I've done my assessments. I don't find it, right? You're giving them a broad kind of 30,000 view of the patient. Typically, this would be, Concord Hospital, Chichester A1 with an entry note. They're going to hear that, get over to the radio. Go ahead, Chichester, right? Once you've hailed the hospital, they say that you can give them the radio report. you want to give them an ETA. How far out are you? Are we 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes? Typically, you're doing 5 or 10 minutes. I personally like to do 10. Gives them some time to know that we're coming. Age, gender, sex of the patient, 30-year-old male, whatever. Just gives them a kind of a quick understanding of that. Mental status, alert and oriented, unresponsive, responsive to painful. I'll also usually include the GCS, GCS 15 or 14 or whatever it is. Gives them kind of another clue as to sick, not sick, right? Chief complaint, fall, trauma, chest pain, nausea. Think back to part of that kind of primary assessment where like, okay, broadly, what's going on? What's the easiest thing? What's the most severe thing? The most obvious thing I can chunk this into? That gives them a really quick idea as to what's going on. Brief, I do mean brief patient history. Feeling nauseous for 3 days. Been having chest pain for 20 minutes, right? Fell from a 20-foot ladder. Keep it broad. Interventions, we gave oxygen, we gave aspirin, we gave an epi. If you've done something, this is where you're going to slow it in. Right? Because if you're giving all these meds, that lets them know, hey, we're doing quite a bit for the patient. They're probably pretty sick. Your baseline set of vitals, I'll typically just give my most recent set. Blood pressure, heart rate, pulse ox, end-tidal if you have it, blood sugar if you have it. Keep it quick. We'll talk about medical direction later, but if there is something that you're unsure about, if there's a procedure that you'd like to do that you're not quite sure about, you can actually call the hospital that you're going to. You can ask for medical direction, and what that is you talking to the doctor and having that conversation of, I'm thinking this, I'd like to do that. What do you think about this? So the nice thing is there's a safety net. We call that medical direction. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. So that's your radio report. You then have your handoff report. And so the handoff report is now we've gotten to the hospital. We've told dispatch you're off. As you walk in, usually there's a board that says, 20-year-old male fall, room 30. Right? So usually there's a board where the information you gave in your radio report, there's a little bit of it, and that directs you into, kind of what room to go into. So you get the patient in the room, you get them into bed, right? You do that, which we'll talk about Wednesday. Now you give the handoff report. This is where you can give all of the details. I like to make sure I'm introducing the patient by name. So let's say the patient's Paul and the nurse is Sandy. So I'll say, hey, Sandy, this is Paul. He's a 50-year-old male. He's coming from home. He came down with chest pain about 2 hours ago. He says it feels that it's crushing the left side of his chest. 10 out of 10, he says it radiates up to his jaw, to his left arm. He does have a history of a heart attack that was about 3 years ago. They placed 2 stents. We did put him on a 12 lead. Didn't say STEMI alert. I have that here for you. His last set of vitals were, 140 over 80. Heart rate was 100. Pulse ox was 100%. We did give him 324 milligrams of aspirin. He chewed that without issue. We gave him 2 liters of oxygen. He was resting comfortably for us in a supine position. He denies any allergies. He says he takes, metformin and metoprolol and a baby aspirin every day. He's been alert and oriented times before for us. He's been a pretty good historian. And do you have any questions for me or anything I didn't answer? Right? And so your handoff report is where you just go stem to stern. Include the patient, talk to him by name. I'll say, they told me this. And it's usually like you're standing in kind of a triangle, standing. The nurse can see you, you can see the patient, because this is collaborative, right? And oftentimes I'll have, my partner with me. If I forgot something, they'll have an opportunity to mention it. The nurse can ask, this, that, or the other thing. And that's kind of your chance to let even the patient, like, I'll sometimes turn to the patient, I'll say, did I forget anything? Right? And that gives the patient opportunity to, oh, actually, yes, this, or this is different, or I forgot. Right? Because I forget stuff. I try not to. I don't want to. But it happens. And by including the patient in their care, by including your partners in the care, and by being open to being correct and making a mistake, the information that needs to get transferred does get transferred. Right? So those are your steps. You have the kind of dispatch and the steps of a call. So we're talking to our dispatch center either through an MDT, mobile data terminal, or through our radios, whether it's portable, mobile, or a base radio if you're at the station still. So you're doing your steps of the call. You're going to make a radio report when you're 5-10 minutes out from the hospital. That's just giving a quick 30,000-foot view of the patient. Then when you get to the hospital, you're doing your handoff report. That's where you're transferring your patient care, right? So that kind of makes sense for you guys. So teamwork, as you can see, is a collaborative effort to achieve a common goal or complete a task. In our case, it's patient care, right? We're patient advocates. We're working in furtherance of their best outcome. So I want us to go over, hold on. I'd like to review another YouTube video. It's from a guy named Simon Sinek. He does a lot of leadership communication and lectures, and he has some really good and intuitive material. And broadly, this video is around empathy, right? And empathy is kind of understanding, where is this other person coming from? What are their perspectives? What are their understandings? Right? Because more often than not, if you had all of the information and the perspective the other person had, you'd probably be making the same decisions, right? And so if I can put in some effort and try to figure out, okay, what are you seeing that I'm not? Where are you coming from? What is your perspective? What is your understanding of this? That way we can work, us against the problem, not us against each other, right? And that's a huge component of teamwork. You need to be able to understand, what is the other person seeing? Where are they coming from? That way we can know, okay, what are they working with? What are we working with? How do we work towards solving this problem?
There's a man by the name of Captain William Swenson, who recently was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for his actions on September 8th, 2009. On that day, a column of American and Afghan troops were making their way through a part of Afghanistan to help protect a group of government officials, a group of Afghan government officials who'd be meeting with some local village elders. The column came under ambush and was surrounded on 3 sides. And amongst many other things, Captain Swenson was recognized for running into live fire to rescue the wounded and pull out the dead. One of the people he rescued was a sergeant, and he and a comrade were making their way to a medevac helicopter. And what was remarkable about this day is, by sheer coincidence, one of the medevac medics happened to have a GoPro camera on his helmet and captured the whole scene on camera. It shows Captain Swenson and his comrade bringing this wounded soldier who'd received a gunshot to the neck. They put him in the helicopter, and then you see Captain Swenson bend over and give him a kiss before he turns around to rescue more. I saw this, and I thought to myself, where do people like that come from? What is that? That is some deep, deep emotion when you would want to do that. There's a love there. And I want to know, why is it that I don't have people that I work with like that? In the military, they give medals to people who are willing to sacrifice themselves so that others may gain. In business, we give bonuses to people who are willing to sacrifice others so that we may gain. We have the back, right? So I asked myself, where do people like this come from? And my initial conclusion was that they're just better people. That's why they're attracted to the military. These better people are attracted to this concept of service. But that's completely wrong. What I learned is that it's the environment. And if you get the environment right, every single one of us has the capacity to do these remarkable things, and more importantly, others have that capacity too. I've had the great honor of getting to meet some of these who we would call heroes, who've put themselves and put their lives at risk to save others. And I asked them, why would you do it? Why did you do it? And they all say the same thing, because they would have done it for me. It's this deep sense of trust and cooperation. So trust and cooperation are really important here. The problem with concepts of trust and cooperation is that they are feelings, they're not instructions. I can't simply say to you, trust me, and you will. I can't simply instruct two people to cooperate, and they will. It's not how it works. It's a feeling. So where does that feeling come from? If you go back 50,000 years to the Paleolithic era, to the early days of Homo sapien, what we find is that the world was filled with danger. All of these forces working very, very hard to kill us. Nothing personal. Whether it was the weather, lack of resources, maybe a saber-toothed tiger, all of these things working to reduce our lifespan. And so we evolved into social animals, where we lived together and worked together in what I call a circle of safety, inside the tribe, where we felt like we belong. And when we felt safe amongst our own, the natural reaction was trust and cooperation. There are inherent benefits to this. It means I can fall asleep at night and trust that someone from within my tribe will watch for danger. If we don't trust each other, if I don't trust you, that means you won't watch for danger. Bad system of survival. The modern day is exactly the same thing. The world is filled with danger, things that are trying to frustrate our lives or reduce our success, reduce our opportunity for success. It could be the ups and downs of an economy, the uncertainty of the stock market. It could be a new technology that renders your business model obsolete overnight. Or it could be your competition that is sometimes trying to kill you. It's sometimes trying to put you out of business, but at the very minimum is working hard to frustrate your growth and steal your business from you. We have no control over these forces. These are a constant and they're not going away. The only variable are the conditions inside the organization. And that's where leadership matters, because it's the leader that sets the tone. When a leader makes the choice to put the safety and lives of the people inside the organization first, to sacrifice their comforts and sacrifice the tangible results so that the people remain and feel safe and feel like they belong, remarkable things happen. I was flying on a trip, and I was witness to an incident where a passenger attempted to board before their number was called. And I watched the gate agent treat this man like he had broken the law, like a criminal. He was yelled at for attempting to board one group too soon. So I said something. I said, why do you have to treat us like cattle? Why can't you treat us like human beings? And this is exactly what she said to me. She said, sir, if I don't follow the rules, I could get in trouble or lose my job. All she was telling me is that she doesn't feel safe. All she was telling me is that she doesn't trust her leaders. The reason we like flying Southwest Airlines is not because they necessarily hire better people, it's because they don't fear their leaders. You see, if the conditions are wrong, we're forced to expend our own time and energy to protect ourselves from each other. And that inherently weakens the organization. When we feel safe inside the organization, we will naturally combine our talents and our strengths and work tirelessly to face the dangers outside and seize the opportunities. The closest analogy I can give to what a great leader is like being a parent. If you think about what being a great parent is, what do you want? What makes a great parent? We want to give our child opportunities, education, discipline them when necessary, all so that they can grow up and achieve more than we could for ourselves. Great leaders want exactly the same thing. They want to provide their people opportunity, education, discipline when necessary, build their self-confidence, give them the opportunity to try and fail, all so that they could achieve more than we could ever imagine for ourselves. Charlie Kim, who's the CEO of a company called NextJump in New York City, a tech company, he makes the point that if you had hard times in your family, would you ever consider laying off one of your children? We would never do it. Then why do we consider laying off people inside our organization? Charlie implemented a policy of lifetime employment. If you get a job at NextJump, you cannot get fired for performance issues. In fact, if you have issues, they will coach you and they will give you support, just like we would with one of our children who happens to come home with a C from school. It's the complete opposite. This is the reason so many people have such a visceral hatred, sort of anger at some of these banking CEOs with their disproportionate salaries and bonus structures. It's not the numbers. It's that they have violated the very definition of leadership. They have violated this deep-seated social contract. We know that they allowed their people to be sacrificed so they could protect their own interests. Or worse, they sacrificed their people to protect their own interests. This is what so offends us, not the numbers. Would anybody be offended if we gave a $150 million bonus to Gandhi? How about a $250 million bonus to Mother Teresa? Do we have an issue with that? None at all. None at all. Great leaders would never sacrifice the people to save the numbers. They would sooner sacrifice the numbers to save the people. Bob Chapman, who runs a large manufacturing company in the Midwest called Barry Waymiller, in 2008, he was hit very hard by the recession, and they lost 30% of their orders overnight. Now, in a large manufacturing company, this is a big deal, and they could no longer afford their labor pool. They needed to save $10 million. So, like so many companies today, the board got together and discussed layoffs. And Bob refused. You see, Bob doesn't believe in head counts. Bob believes in heart counts. And it's much more difficult to simply reduce the heart count. And so they came up with a furlough program. Every employee from secretary to CEO was required to take 4 weeks of unpaid vacation. They could take it any time they wanted, and they did not have to take it consecutively. But it was how Bob announced the program that mattered so much. He said, it's better that we should all suffer a little than any of us should have to suffer a lot. And morale went up. They saved $20 million. And most importantly, as would be expected, when the people feel safe and protected by the leadership in the organization, the natural reaction is to trust and cooperate. And quite spontaneously, nobody expected, people started trading with each other. Those who could afford it more would trade with those who could afford it less. People would take 5 weeks so that somebody else only had to take 3. Leadership is a choice. It is not a rank. I know many people at the senior-most levels of organizations who are absolutely not leaders. They are authorities, and we do what they say because they have authority over us, but we would not follow them. And I know many people who are at the bottoms of organizations who have no authority, and they are absolutely leaders. And this is because they have chosen to look after the person to the left of them, and they have chosen to look after the person to the right of them. This is what a leader is. I heard a story of some Marines who were out in theater, and as is the Marine custom, the officer ate last, and he let his men eat first. And when they were done, there was no food left for him. And when they went back out in the field, his men brought him some of their food so that he may eat. Because that's what happens. We call them leaders because they go first. We call them leaders because they take the risk before anybody else does. We call them leaders because they will choose to sacrifice so that their people may be safe and protected, and so their people may gain. And when we do, the natural response is that our people will sacrifice for us. They will give us their blood and sweat and tears to see that their leader's vision comes to life. And when we ask them, why would you do that? Why would you give your blood and sweat and tears for that person? They all say the same thing. Because they would have done it for me. And isn't that the organization we would all like to work in? Thank you very much.
Simon Sinek puts out quite a few talks, and they're all really pretty good. And I think he's able to put into words fairly eloquently some of the concepts that I've been trying to get at and communicate. And so, I'm not going to rehash what he said or what he's done, but I do want to add one point before we move on. And that is that you get out of a room what you put into it. And I wish I'd learned this sooner. But, when you walk into a room and there's a patient and there's a nurse and there's a family member, you decide how that goes, right? What I mean by that is if you walk into the room with a smile and you crack a joke and you're in a good mood and they can pick up on that, that's the energy you're met with. Like if you walk into the room with a good mood and a good attitude, that's what you're getting. The rest of your patient counter with the family, even if they're stressed, even if they're worked up, 9 out of 10 times, if not more, you're getting these good vibes back. You're getting this positive energy back. If you walk into the room and you have a shit attitude and you're grumpy, you're mean, you're rude, whatever it is, that's what you're getting back, right? And then they're going to be short with you because you were short to them, and then you're going to walk out and you're like, oh man, they're jerks. And then you're going to walk into another room, and the same thing's going to happen. You're going to go throughout your entire day, and you're going to think to yourself, everyone's been an a-hole. When in reality, it's been you, right? And so if you get to the end of your day and everyone you interfaced with was stupid or dumb or mean or a jerk, it wasn't them. It wasn't everybody. Like if you interfaced with 10 people and one of them was a jerk, yeah, sure, they were having a bad day or whatever. But if everyone you interface with is dumb, oh, everyone's dumb but me, I have news for you. It's not them, it's you. And when you do this line of work, like the job has to get done, right? Like you're gonna have the patient counter, you're gonna have the transfer, you're gonna have whatever it is. And do you want it to be easier or do you want it to be more grueling, right? So if you walk into the room and you have a positive attitude, if you can increase their mood, you have a good mood, we're gonna get the job done, right? We're gonna do what we need to do. We're gonna take care of business. You walk into the room with a poor attitude, and that's what they give back to you. Now you have this adversarial patient contact, and it's a mess. And so, really, what I'm trying to get at is as as you go through, um, really spend some time, work on your communication, work on how you carry yourself, how you present yourself, um, how you interface with your team and your patients because it may not sound like a lot, but it actually really is a big deal. It's really a big part of what we do. And the data backs me up. And folks who have a good patient affect, which means if the patient likes you, you're nice to them, you talk to them by name, you use the therapeutic communication, like you do all of the things they've been advocating, you have less likelihood of getting sued. And even if you make a mistake, right? Um, wow, that EMT was so nice. He really took care of me. Even though there was a mistake, like I could really tell that he cared and, they wanted to do a good job, so and so. Like you're just less likely, right? So even if you need to be selfish, do it for these reasons. But from the patient's perspective, if they call 911 and the EMT shows up and they're short and they're mean and they're snarky, like that's not good for anybody. They're not going to want to share information with you. That information may be critical to you being able to do a good job. Um, it's gonna make everything worse if you're not doing taking the patient affect seriously. So just that's my soapbox. I'll get off of it, but um, that's my piece. All right. Accessing the EMS system. We kind of talked about the communication steps, right? Those kind of the steps and the radio calls that you're going to make. But how do patients access the system, right? What we talked about is our perspective. What's the patient's perspective in all of this? Um, and so the first thing is a need, right? Like something arises where the patient or the people feel that they need additional help. Like the coolest thing I think about doing this job and working in this profession is like who calls 911? Like adults with mortgages and kids and careers and like all of these things. Um, and they call 911 because they have a problem they can't solve, right? Like somebody's injured, somebody's sick, somebody's house is on fire, like a car rolled over, like the thing is arcing and the alarm's going, whatever, right? Like, oh, you're telling me my job is to show up in either a fire truck or an ambulance and like find and fix problems that other people weren't able to solve. Coolest thing ever, right? Like that's awesome. We get to like solve problems, right? That other people don't know the answer to. And so the patient's first step or the public's first step of accessing EMS is there's something happens, either it happened a while ago, it typically just happened, um, but there's some sort of problem that they're not able to diagnose and remedy on their own, right? So we call 911. Here in the US, that's how you access it. Different countries, they do it differently. In the state of New Hampshire, you can actually text 911. So if you open up your phone, you text 911, they can get a hold. You can get a hold of them. That's more useful in cases where you can't talk because maybe, somebody can hear you, or let's say you don't have great cell service, you're, edge of a service area, mountain, whatever it may be. So you have limited bandwidth, you can text. When you call 911, the first thing they want to know is where are you? And then they're going to want to know what's going on, right? One of the things that I do because of the job that I do is as I drive around, I just try to always know where I am, right? I try to figure cross streets and towns and roads. So I make it a goal to always be able to answer the question as to where I am. So if I don't know where I am, I get a little nervous, right? Because if I have to call or if I'm at work and I see something, I need to be able to activate EMS, call dispatch, call who I need to call, let them know, hey, something's going on, here's where we are. So where are you? And then what do you need? Do you need police? Do you need fire? Do you need EMS? Do you need all of them? And dispatch susses that out for us. But from the caller's perspective, you're going to be asked a whole bunch of questions and you might not understand why. But the reason you're asked these questions is these resources are dispatched differently. They come from different places. They do different things. And so the EMS system is trying to figure out like, okay, what is going on? What resources do you need? Are there any risks to the public, to the caller, to the patient, to the responders? Right? And dispatch fortunately does a lot of this for us. And then in the system, you have us, right? We arrive with our tools and our apparatus and our questions and our notepads, and we do our assessment and we do our interventions and we do our treatment. And very often we transport to the appropriate emergency room, right? Depending on where you are, if you're down in Manchester, you get a couple options. If you're, up in Colebrook, you have one option. So it just kind of depends where you're on, okay, what ED are you going to go to? Stands for emergency department. You also hear them called ERs, emergency rooms, same thing. But which hospital are we going to go to, right? And it's at the hospital that the patient gets what we call definitive care, right? Definitive care is where they're actually able to remedy or at least stabilize, whatever the need was from the onset of accessing the CMS system. It's really pretty rare that the treatments we do are all that the patient needs. Typically at the hospital, there's more thorough assessment and more interventions and labs and some of these other things. We're frequently operating as a stopgap, make the patient comfortable, treat what we can, get them to the ER where they get that definitive care, right? From there, if that hospital that we brought them to is not capable of doing what the patient needs, right? Because the thing that surprises a lot of people is not all hospitals do all things, right? Different hospitals have different specialties and capabilities. And when you work in a system, it's going to be on you to know, okay, this hospital has this capability, this hospital has this capability. I'm bringing them to the right place, when and if able to. But then the other side of the coin is that hospital may not have the resources or the capacity or whatever to treat the patient. And so they may get transferred, right? And that interfacility transfer or IFT frequently happens by EMTs, right? They have to get from one hospital to the other. And so that's where you get a lot of these private companies that do transfers. And they're going to take a patient from hospital A over to hospital B or to the nursing home or from the nursing home to a doctor's appointment, right? And so you become an EMT, you may be working in this 911 system, responding to 911 calls. You may be working on the back end, getting patients transferred. And more often than not, these patients are sicker, right? Because hospital A, the definitive care that the 911 provider took them to, couldn't solve the problem, right? So now we get to respond to a patient who the hospital, like a doctor, couldn't solve this. Right? They know the answer, they just don't have the tools. And so we got to get the patient transferred over. They're likely still sick. So it's actually really pretty cool, the different aspects of the EMS system, right? We may be working an event or a first aid tent, and people may walk up to us instead of calling 911. And so us as EMS providers, we can do like all of these kind of different components. So we spent a fair bit of time talking about EMDs, emergency medical dispatchers. We talked about public safety answering points. The call takers are the people in the PSAP who actually answer the call. And then the dispatchers are the folks who take the call details and then dispatch the apparatus. Chichester A1, go here. Goffstown A2, go here. Right? Those are the dispatchers. Depending where you are, those are the same people. In New Hampshire, they're different people. It just kind of depends on the region and the area that you're in. State of New Hampshire, the state does our 911 call taking. Massachusetts, each town does their own. So you have a huge disparity in quality and ability of the call takers down there. Then we have the responders. There's different levels of EMS responders. So you guys are in a EMT, emergency medical technician class. EMS providers are, there's different levels to it. EMT is what we consider BLS or basic life support. So you give medications, you do assessments, you do treatments, you do interventions. You can go higher. There's more things that you can grow into and be able to do. There's also a step lower than EMTs that's called EMR, Emergency Medical Responder. It's a 50 to 80 hour class, and it's kind of a lot of the real quick, dirty basics. You do get a EMS license. You can count as part of the crew. There does have to at least be an EMT still. A lot of the EMR folks are usually like call all firefighters, and they're helping on the ambulance. They drive, they lift, they move. It's pretty rare that the EMR is doing the paperwork and treating, being the lead patient care tech, but they can. So EMR is kind of the most entry level provider, less than 100 hours of training, has a license, but it's a lot of being a support role. It's initial stabilization, managing the immediate life threats, and then doing a lot of support. EMT, you're making decisions, you're leading patient care, you're doing all sorts of these things, right? You're kind of the lead BLS provider. There's then what we call ALS, Advanced Life Support. AEMT is Advanced EMT, so that's the next step up. And then there's a paramedic. That's the 18-month, 2-year program. Some programs are a year. I don't know that I would do that. Feels a little accelerated, but regardless, these are ALS providers. Bit of misconception. You do not have to become an AEMT to become a paramedic. You can be an EMT and then go to paramedic school. So EMT is a optional intermediate step, if you will. They can do IVs, they can give some more drugs, they can give nitrous oxide and, do a couple other things. So as you move up the food chain, if you will, you unlock greater abilities within your scope of practice. So things that you can do. We'll talk about scope of practice when it comes to medical malpractice. That's when that comes into play. So those are the EMS responders. Ambulances require 2 licensed providers. If there's going to be an EMR, you need at least an EMT or higher. You can have 2 EMTs. You can have an EMR and an EMT. You can have 2 AEMTs. You can have an EMT and an AEMT. You can have 2 paramedics. You can have an EMT and a so you can chunk these crews up. But for an ambulance to be considered legal, you need 2 providers because you need a licensed provider who drives and a licensed provider in the back. Now, if you have someone, say a firefighter is not licensed, not certified, you can have them drive, and then those 2 providers can both be in the back providing patient care. So transport, a licensed transport ambulance in the state and really everywhere needs 2 licensed providers, but they can be in the back, they can be one in the front, one in the back, but you need the 2. You then have the EDs, the emergency department or the emergency room. This is the hospital. This is where you have the physicians and the nurses and the mid-levels, allied health professionals. Those are the folks who do x-rays and lab draws and, medical imaging and these sorts of things. And so it's at the hospital where they're getting the definitive care. They have, a larger team of people and specialties, and there's a lot more that they can do. Our role is identification, stabilization, transport, um, managing the things that we can, getting them safely to the definitive care, so they can, ultimately, ideally be treated. Different facilities, like I said earlier, do different things. You have hospitals that are trauma centers. There's different levels of trauma center, level one, level two, level three, level four. Level one's the best, or it's the highest, I should say. Dartmouth Hitchcock is the only level one trauma center in New Hampshire. Level twos are also really pretty good. Concord's one, Elliott's one. Level twos are pretty squared away. Burn centers, really, if somebody has severe burns, they're going down to Boston. We're so fortunate in that we have the world's best hospitals an hour and a half away from us. We're probably not driving patients to Boston ourselves. We may call for a helicopter. The helicopter may take them to Boston. We may bring them to, our local trauma center. And then they make it an interfacility transfer there. So typically we're not the ones bringing them to burn centers because it's down in Boston. Pediatric centers, right? So our patients under 18, all hospitals have to be able to accept pediatric patients. It doesn't mean they're all really good at dealing with pediatric patients, right? Just because you can doesn't mean you're the best at it. Not throwing shade, but that just is what it is. Um, as you work in an area, you'll learn what hospitals do what, all hospitals are capable of taking cardiac and stroke patients, but not all of them have the same ability to do the interventions that maybe some of the others do. But just recognize different hospitals do different things, and just depending on your service area, you'll figure that out. EMS provider levels, responsibilities. I actually already kind of talked about that, but all levels are responsible for patient and personal safety. Right? You need to make sure that you're safe, your patient's safe, your partner's safe, bystanders are safe. We're all responsible for patient assessment and care. We're all responsible for lifting and moving the patient safely, transporting them to the hospital safely. When you get to the hospital, making sure that you do a transfer of care, which means you can't just get to the hospital and walk away. That patient care needs to be transferred to somebody at an equal or higher level, where that care needs to be terminated. Right? We'll be talking about that later on. And we're all responsible for patient advocacy, right? Doing the right thing for the patient, doing the right thing on behalf of the patient, even if it's the hard thing, right? But we talked about what these different levels do, and as you spend time in this career in this profession, you'll pick up on okay what the different levels do, what they can, what they can't, and as you study and look through the EMS protocol, you'll see. Oh, EMRs do this, EMTs do this, A's do this, paramedics do this. So you'll actually get to see, oh, if I call for an ALS intercept, what is it that they're able to do? What is it that they will do? What can they check for? What are some things I can assess for them? That way, when they get there, I've made their job a little bit easier. So just because you're operating as an EMT, it's still important to understand what are the capacities of the other levels. What are they likely to do? What do they need? Because again, we're a team, right? So if I'm working with an EMT and an AEMT, okay, well, I as the medic, I can intubate, I can do certain drugs and the monitor, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to have the AEMT get access and manage some of the pain stuff and do that. I'm going to have the EMT. You're probably on airway, right? You're going to manage airway and breathing and maybe some supplemental oxygen. And so it's important to know, okay, what can the different levels do? That way, as I have my team, I can assign you to the things that make the most sense. That way the patient gets the care that they ultimately need, right? Traits of a good EMS provider, we've spent some time talking about this. With respect to communication, it's huge. Communication between you and the patient, you and your coworkers, you and the hospital staff, you and your leadership, all super important. You need to be able to be good at communication, have empathetic and therapeutic communication because you're there for the patient, you're not there for you. Accountability. If you have something up, own it. If you make a mistake, own it. Like if you did something wrong, if like own it. Um, and just work on making it better, right? Like it's okay to make mistakes, but it's not okay to miss those mistakes or have such an ego that you refuse to accept that you made a mistake and just always know that you can always get better. I'm over a decade into this and I still learn new stuff. I still pick things up from colleagues and hospitals and it's the only way to do about it. Like the day you know everything is the day you need to retire. Um, because there is no day that you know everything. It's just the day that your ego's taken over and you're no longer um, going to be efficient if you feel that there's nothing that you can learn and nothing that you can pick up from the folks you work with and other providers. Um, Leadership, teamwork, super important, right? Like when people call 911, they've admitted that they don't have the answer. They can't solve the problem. They need help. And if you show up and you can't take charge and you can't lead a team and you can't work as part of a team, their issue's not going to get taken care of, right? And they're going to lose trust in fire and EMS and our profession and us, and they're going to be hesitant and they're probably maybe not going to call again, and that causes all sorts of problems. Another trait, knowledge. Like you just have to know things, right? You don't have to know everything because you can't. But you do need to know the core foundation of your job, and you also need to know how to figure things out that you don't know, right? Google protocol, like your colleagues being willing to ask. You need a certain base level of knowledge, and you also need to know, okay, how do I find the answer to this? Super important. And integrity, being honest with yourself, being honest with your patient, your colleagues. Like, you're an integrity violator. This is just not the profession for you. We have vulnerable people that we deal with. We're going into people's homes on their worst day, in various stages of responsiveness. Um, if you don't have integrity, this isn't for you. If you work with someone who doesn't have integrity, that's a real problem. Have a talk with leadership. Like, it just is what it is. I'd also say a good work ethic should probably be thrown in here. I We can teach you anything, right? Like we can pay for a class, we can send you to a class, we can give you training, we can give you simulation, we can give you scenarios, we can do all this. We can't give you work ethic, we can't give you accountability, we can't give you integrity. If you want this to be a thing that you do, you need to be accountable. If you say you're gonna do something, do it. Um, have a good work ethic. Show up early. Do the work. Don't just go to the day room, turn the lights off, and be a lazy blob. Like, show up early, check your truck, have your uniform squared away. Like, if you walk by and there's a paper towel on the ground, pick it up, put it in the trash, right? This is a team sport. This is a communal effort. Um, there's no I in team. I suppose there's a me, but we'll stay out of that. Um, this is also can certainly be a stressful job, especially when you're newer in the career and not making a whole lot of money. Um, I am probably not the person to teach you, everything there is about stress. So I'm going to show you, a little bit of humility on this one. I'm going to kind of point some things out, but I'm certainly not a therapist, by any means. But it is important to recognize that this job and this profession comes with stress. It comes from stress from you don't always make a lot of money, especially at the beginning. You're working odd hours. You're getting woken up in the middle of the night and you're tired and you're groggy. You're out in snowstorms and um, you're many times being verbally, if not physically, abused by the public. Leadership can sometimes not be great. There's all sorts of things that can happen. Um, And stress can certainly eat away at you. And it's funny because you don't know it until it's, either happened because it's not really a thing that you look out for or that you know to look out for. Um, Personally, as I became older and more mature and kind of more solidified in my identity and who I am, I was able to pick up on this more and be like, oh, I'm working too much. Like, I shouldn't work here. Like I need to change this. I need to change this and take a day off, whatever it is. Because the stress can get you, the fatigue can get you, and it's all additive, right? It can all just kind of build and build. It can go from, it can become acute, which is kind of like an instant kind of stress reaction, and it can be chronic over the long term. This stuff adds up, and it's bad for you too. You know what I mean? Like it's not good for your health to have this kind of chronic stress. Um, so what are some things that we might identify in ourselves that could kind of clue us in that we're stressing and depressing, if you will, right? Um, Emotions. So if you feel fear, anger, sadness, worry, you feel down a lot, like out, like more often than not, or even a few times, or more than your baseline, that can be a sign that you're under stress. If you have abnormal changes to your appetite, your levels of energy, your interests or desires to do things that you might otherwise be interested in or go out with friends, um, if you're having difficulties sleeping, staying asleep, or focusing on things, if your body physically ails you, if you have headaches, body pains, you have stomach problems, changes to your health conditions, if you have an increase or develop a dependence on either alcohol or misuse of drugs or prescriptions, whatever it may be, one of these, a combination of these, all of these, any of these, right, are clues that hey, that wasn't me 6 months ago, but this is now me. What's changed? Right? Like, is this what I want for myself? And usually the answer would be no, right? And so what do we do? Right? Well, the first thing is like pull in resources. Like, if you're out in the ocean and you're barely treading water, like, you're not going to fix that by yourself. Like, get, you know what I mean? Get a life raft, right? You can't build a life raft as you're drowning, you know what I mean? Um, Limiting alcohol intake, um, not using drugs, not misusing prescription drugs, right? Take care of yourself. It's so hard, dude. It is so incredibly difficult to eat healthy in this job. It's soul crushing sometimes. Um, like because you're always on the road, you do long shifts. Like I personally hate meal prepping. Like, especially, I'm married now, but before when I was single, it's like I don't want to cook for one. That's like, huh? And then you go and you try to eat healthy, and it's like, yeah, try getting a salad from McDonald's, or try getting a salad from Wendy's. They're awful, right? And then McDonald's doesn't even have them, so you go to the gas station. Like the hard-boiled eggs are honestly pretty good. Big fan there. Or you just can eat hard-boiled eggs for every meal. Like you need like vegetables, you know what I mean? Um, but then especially in the beginning of the career, it's like, oh, you don't make a lot, and you go to the gas station, it's like $18 for a shitty salad, and it's like $8 for a Hungry Man, and you're like, well, at least I'll be full after I eat the Hungry Man. Like it's all salt and like just empty carbs, and it's like, oh, this is terrible. And so I don't even have the best advice for you, but just recognize like the food you put into your body, it goes so far. Like when you eat like real food. Like if you go to the grocery store, all the stuff in the middle, it's all just made by machines. It's all just robots putting random stuff together. And I don't think it's, I'm not a huge fan of processed stuff. But honestly, like you start cutting that out of your diet, you feel better, you sleep better, you have more energy. It's incredible. I spent, the first 7 years of my career just eating McDonald's and Wendy's and gas station food and saying, well, it's 2 a.m. I have no other options. Like I hate meal prepping. Um, and you just feel it, man. Like you'll have those days where your check engine light is like for your body, it's just like flashing. And you're like, oh no, this isn't good. I should have a cup of water. Um, and if you can learn from my mistakes, that's awesome. I'm not perfect. I still go to Wendy's. I live 200 feet from a McDonald's. Like, ugh, you know what I mean? But moderation, right? Like, I'm not saying don't have any fast food, or like, oh, but if you are able to make as many meals at home, like try to eat healthier foods, you're going to have more energy, you're going to feel better. And if you feel better, you can make better decisions. It can help manage the stress. Because if you're under these stressors of working long hours and working on nights and being woken up, and you're always on the road, and now you're worried about money and you're also not eating, like this stuff compounds, right? So like one crime at a time. Like if you're going to have drugs in your car, like go with the speed limit, dude. You know what I mean? And so it's the same thing with your body. Like, if you have a stressful job, you really should also be exercising and getting, appropriate amounts of sleep and eating healthy. And so that's the input that I can give you. I'm not a dietitian, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a therapist. If you find that you're struggling with any of these, seek help, reach out to your doctor, um, you know, find a therapist, you can chat with them. Honestly, Google's a really pretty good resource. Most employers have what's called EAP, an employer assistance program. So pretty much all employers have kind of an anonymous phone number that you can call. You can say, hey, here's what I'm struggling with. Here's what I'm dealing with. Like, what can we do? But honestly, with you type a thing into Google and it gives you an answer these days, incredible. Um, let's sorry, you're gonna see me jump around. How far are we? All right, let's let's call it here for tonight. Just because I don't want to get halfway through a topic. We don't have enough time to cover the medical legal. And I'd like to keep it together for us. So, do you have any questions for me? I'm happy to answer them the best I can, especially with, kind of the stress and the healthy eating. Hopefully, I wasn't too down on you, but boy, I'll tell you right now, I still struggle with it. I hate meal prepping. I hate cooking for one. And my wife just won't eat leftovers. And so what you'll find is even once you have things figured out, this is honestly, I think the hardest part of the job is figuring out eating well. Um, so if you're able to crack that nut, you'll go pretty far.